Fireside Chat with Brian Pirrip, LCS Explorer and American Adventurer, Part 2. Hey there, welcome to episode 7. And I can confidently say that this is going to be episode 7 of the Car Diary by Javier Thompson, because the last one was episode 6, not 5, like I may have said, because I didn't take into account that the first Fireside Chat was a two-parter, which this one also is. So you may have just listened to part 1 of my Fireside Chat with Brian Pirrip, and I hope you have enjoyed our chat so far, because I think in part 2 it gets even better and more real. We briefly addressed the reason for the technical difficulties at the end of part 1, which makes sense if you watch the video, but I really did want this to be mainly an audio podcast experience. But the video does allow me to make some fun clips to promote the show. And actually, that's what I wanted to talk about before I get to part 2 here, and that is promoting the show. Um, and before I get to that, I wanted to say that I see on Instagram people who say, well, something's wrong with the algorithm for TikTok or Instagram, or that I'm being shadow banned, or something's happening because I have such few likes or engagement. And I don't know I don't know all the ins and outs, and you may be right. But what I know about my content is sometimes it lands and sometimes it doesn't. But I have asked some of those folks who worry about that, like, why does it matter? Why does it matter what your engagement is or how many likes you get? And I think it's only fair if I ask that question inwardly to myself and share that out with all of you. Why do I talk about the numbers sometimes? Like I've mentioned it a couple of times. And quite frankly, I think it's because we want to be heard. I think that we want to that actually, maybe we want to know that our voice means something, that it matters in this world. And I'm here to tell you that it does. Your voice does matter. And that's why I do try to engage with as many people on Instagram as I can, to the detriment of other things in my life. Because so long as you are being civil and courteous, I would like to think that I am doing that as well. Other than the times I'm being what I hope is clearly and patently sarcastic or good natured fun, because I like to have lighthearted fun. But I do hear you. I do hear the comments. I think some creators say, "Don't read the comments," or "Don't do this, don't do that." Like, I don't know. I'm small fish. I'm having fun. I like to engage. I think that everyone's voice is important. And again, if people are discourteous or not civil, then that can just be taken care of. So when it comes to this podcast, man, like this episode, especially this second part, I think it's so good. And I want a lot of people to listen to it. That's why I want to promote this podcast. Is it nice to see the numbers go up? Yeah, it is. For those of you who create, you know that you get that rush, that feeling. And eventually I want to talk about podcasting and content creation, because until you are one of those folks, I think it's hard to understand the psyche or mindset of a creator. But what do those numbers even mean, right? To put it very simply, those numbers are you, the listener. It's every time you click on this podcast, you download it, you stream it, and I hope that you love it because I love it, or maybe you just like it. I don't know. You tolerate it. But my hope is that you, you get high quality podcast content, and maybe I'm not there yet. I hope to get there, but I really am proud of myself for even starting this podcast, starting from zero, and that I haven't even scratched the surface yet, because, so far to this point, I've only talked about the journey from the transactional side of things. But once we get to the creative side, just some examples being the custom card art, the content creation, the podcasting, like I was mentioning earlier, I think it's going to be so much more fun. But, and to steal that from, I think, another podcast, not in the hobby, I think it's like two What's in a Wow, but it's like, and there's a very big but. I do have some incredible podcast guests lined up about the transactional side. and I think I need to get to them, or not need, but I want to get to them first before we move on to the next chapters of the Card Diary by Javier Thompson. So I hope you continue to do one of two things. One, learn something new or cool, or two, enjoy the ride, or better yet, both. And I'm already at the 5 minute mark. So without further ado, part two, oh, that rhymes, of my fireside chat with Brian Pirrip. Enjoy. All right. I think I have to wait for the second timer to start. So then I think it started now. All right, all right, all right. Like Matthew McConaughey likes to say, we had to have a little bit of a pause, which I think is perfect. So for those of you who are listening to just the audio, the video, you'll get it. And, Brian is currently on camera in a car. I will let him explain what's going on because I think it's just part of your journey.
Oh, it's a huge part of it. I spend so much time on the road that if I ever do calls like this or even any kind of work calls, everything is like on my laptop in the car, tethered to my phone. And so, like right now, I'm sitting in a parking lot in Del Mar, San Diego, having just finished a couple meetings, and now I've got to drive out to Palm Springs. Sun's hitting the car, and so the phone overheats, and all of a sudden, boop, lose the signal. So there you go.
Well, thank you again for your time during this. I think this is a great, I think the half point mark, we've been talking for about 30 minutes, I think. So I wanted to get right into the expertise area because you have seen more card shops than I think anyone. I mean, who knows, right? But let me ask you the question that I had for you, and then I want to ask you like a chat GPT question, and then talk about again the Phil Knight and Nike and all that. So here we go. Let's get right into it. In a world where so much is moving towards online transactions and online selling platforms, what is the importance of local card shops? And by the way, that type of question I wanted to say comes, it's almost like an office joke because I know that you're a Cornell grad and I know the running joke in the office is Cornell, ever heard of it?
Yes.
So I remember this scene in The Office where Steve Carell's character was asked by Ryan, the intern, his MBA class. One of the students was asking him how a paper company can adapt in an ever increasingly paperless world. So I wanted to kind of ask, in this world where it's clearly things are moving digital and electronic and online, the very real and serious question of like, what is the importance of local card shops?
Great question. And yeah, I've always hated Andy in The Office for ruining my alma mater. It's this. My analogy to it will be NFTs and sports cards, trading cards.
Okay.
We are in a very digital world. You would think that most people, a lot of people think, oh yeah, nobody's going to want to buy cards anymore because we live in a digital era and you can have all this stuff on your computer. And you know what? It's not the case. NFTs completely dropped. Cards doing great. And it's because I think there's something about being in a digital world that actually takes it too far, where people want something they can hold, something that's tactile, something that they can own. Like you own an NFT, you don't really feel like you own an NFT. It's the physical owning of a card, of holding it, of looking at it is still really important. It's the same reason why fine art, the Picassos, the Monets are still going to matter no matter what, is that there's a finite amount of these kind of specialty items. And so I think the same thing is true with the local card shops, is that you can get all the digital you want. You can do all the Instagram and the whatnot. But at the end of the day, there's something really special about walking into a card shop, looking around, seeing cards that you hope to own, cards that you can't afford, packs that you want to have, other people that are in the shop. Most of the times I go in the shop, I'll at least strike up some conversation with at least someone. And talking, you don't get that digitally. That's where I keep going back to this whole idea of community, that the local card shops will always exist. Whenever you have a boom time, you'll have a lot of extra card shops that pop up as quickly as they can to try to take advantage of that and try to cash in. And
Mhm.
so I think there will be some contraction. I think Fanatics hopes to 10 times the market, so there's probably going to be still growth in the local card shops, but
Mhm.
I think over time card shops will weed out the bad eggs, or the ones that are just opportunistic, and the ones
Mm.
that are like built around community and positive energy and all this. It's going to stay no matter what. Like, one of my favorite card shops in the country is actually probably about 10 minutes from here, Ross Collectibles, and
Mm.
it's because they're constantly doing trade nights. There's always kids in the shop. Every time I walk into to that shop, there's always kids. There's a positive energy, and the owner of the shop is trying to build a community, for all the people in the area to come and to engage with it. And he's always constantly thinking of, how can I improve this shop and make it better, make it a place that people just want to come and spend time at. So yeah, you can have all the digital stuff in the world, but at the end of the day, there's still being a human, and there's still things that we want to feel
Mhm.
and experience and see. It's the same
Yeah.
reason why we're all, I can watch baseball on television all I want,
Mhm.
but watching baseball on television is nothing like actually being at a game. And that's how it is with local card shops. They'll always be.
I love that. I love that. So again, this isn't in my show notes, but when you were saying all that, I was thinking about the five senses, right? The human five senses. When you have your phone, you have your visual, you have your audio, but you don't, yes, you're holding the phone, I guess, or on the laptop, but you don't get that tactile feel of cards and being in a shop. That smell. You talked about the fresh packs of tops. I remember. So I stopped collecting. I wasn't a heavy baseball collector, but when I got back into some baseball recently, I didn't realize that Topps baseball cards have a smell that like Panini cards don't.
Yeah.
Um, and then I read something where maybe it's like some sort of chemical to actually get you to, like, I won't go into the conspiracy theories, but apparently there are some chemicals and things during the printing process that are just different with those two printing companies. And then of course the fifth sense is taste, which I guess none of us are eating the cardboard, or at least you would like to think.
Yeah. Well, we always had the bubble gum back in the day,
Oh
right?
yes, there you go.
The history of sports cards is the history of bubble gum. So they're intertwined.
Will 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 Fanatics bring back the bubble gum? I
Oh,
wonder.
I have some very strong suspicions that bubblegum will be coming back this next year.
Oh man, big buyer on bubble gum. We got big bubble gum in the house. That's awesome. So I love that you talked about community. I agree. I think that's the main thing. Is in a world where we are so fractured by social media, it's amazing that you are a bright spot, bright light in the hobby, where you are actually, your social media presence is so positive and good. So I think that is what's missing. And I guess my question to you is, when it comes to our currently fractured society, can you see cardboard bringing us together?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, it's on a niche level right now, but I think the hobby will continue to grow. I think that a lot that Fanatics is wanting to do with. I mean, one of their major goals is to make it more international, bring
Hmm.
just a lot more people, making it visible. Like,
Mm.
as I like what Ruben always said, with nobody's ever seen commercials on television about sports cards, but now
Hmm.
you will, and increasingly so.
Mm.
So I just think that, like, I mean, I'll always be split about it. Like, there are days where all I want to do, like, one of my favorite things to do is to get myself, like, if I'm on a road trip, or even if I'm at my place, is to go get like a pizza, you know,
Mm.
buy a box of like new Bowman or new Tops or whatever,
Mm.
go back to my place, put on a favorite movie, or
Mm.
favorite album or whatever, and just rip by myself. Like, no matter how much content I do, like, I don't film everything, right?
Ah, okay.
There's like, I'll be at my place by myself and just
Hmm.
enjoying ripping a box, listening to some tunes, eating a pizza or whatever. And that for me is a really just relax. That's therapy for me. That's a real relaxing experience. But then there's the other half of it that's about, card shops and stadiums. And I think there's going to be more integration between card shops, stadiums, making the whole thing more engaging as a whole.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think, yeah, I mean, I think there will always be I think that trading cards is a way for people. Yeah, it's a great equalizer. It's I think it will have its part to play in bringing people together.
Awesome. I love it. And do you? I gotta ask. I mean, you mentioned pizza, and I am getting hungry. What's your? I'm sure there's. I'm sure the best pizza you've ever had in your life is probably your travels to Italy or some.
Yeah.
If it's in America, it's some like Trattoria or some small place that is not franchised. But is this controversial? Like, would you like to share with us, the listeners, your favorite franchise pizzeria chain?
Oh, franchise. Yeah. I'm a
Or
Domino's
should
guy, dude. I'm
Domino's?
all
Okay.
Domino's. I'm Domino's. And Domino's because Domino's is always there for me. Wherever I am in the
Always.
country, doesn't matter if I'm on the edge of the Grand Canyon, Domino's will find
Yeah.
me, right?
Oh man.
So I got a lot of loyalty to those guys because they've always been there for me, man. And there's nothing like opening a box of Bowman while having a
Mm-hmm.
full Domino's blowout, like
Yeah.
bells and whistles, all of it. That's a
That's
good night.
awesome. Do you what was the mascot called? It was like Domino's Noid or something like that. I'm just completely off top of my brain. It was like this Domino's logo with like hands and feet and just walking around. I don't know. I think there's like a video
Yeah.
game with that. I'm gonna have to probably fact check that
But
on the way out.
I mean, I love my New York pizza and I love my Italian pizza.
Oh
And so
gosh,
whether I'm
yeah.
in Italy or New York or whatever, it's all different food groups. It's like, it's not even the same food. It's just
New
totally
York, I
different.
mean, again, I wasn't planning to segue into this, but so I romanticized my local card shop as a kid in Queens, New York. And I wanted to give you this opportunity. If you could paint us the word picture like you're Bob Ross and you are just giving us these word trees, is there a way, could you, off, I didn't ask this beforehand, but would you be able to paint us the word picture of your local card shop? And I believe you grew up in Beaverton, Oregon, based on your,
Yeah.
um, and I'm stalling a little bit here for time, so you can kind of your brain can get back to that nostalgic time. But when I first came to America when I was 2 years old, my family we lived in Corvallis, Oregon, because my dad was going to Oregon State University. Go Beavers, I guess.
Yep.
And so but I was 2 years old. There were pictures of me with a ton of roses and rose gardens. I don't remember any of it as a kid, but I do remember my dad loving that it was like tax free. So, but yeah, could you take us back to that time and just like romanticize that local card shop?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's funny. My dad went to the same school as yours. It was a Beavers situation. And yeah, my hometowns are Beaverton, Oregon, and San Clemente, California, like Orange
Mm,
County.
mm,
That's why you usually see me in either A's hats or Dodgers hats or Blazers hats. That's what I
mm-hmm.
tend to wear a lot.
Yep.
But for me, Beaverton was really where card collecting, that was the foundation of all of it. And so when I think about the words and the kind of the stuff around it, because there were 3 different card shops I grew up going to when I was a kid, and it was like, it's like that scene in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory when you walk in and there's the guy running the shop and he's kind of like, very engaged with everyone and the kids and you're wanting to try everything. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, the card shop is, there's always a smell to it. It's
Mm.
like cardboard, bubble gum, the printing, and it's a mix of things. I like, there's the boxes and the cards that you cannot own. So there's a museum quality to it.
Mm-hmm.
There's the
Mm-hmm.
museum aspect where I'm like, whoa, I can never. Here's a Mickey Mantle card. I can't believe I'm looking at a Mickey Mantle card. So there's the
Yeah.
museum element. There's all the current stuff. Oh, this is the current packs that are important. There's other kids. There's other people in the shop. There's the Beckett magazines. We're running through the price guide to see what something might cost.
Yep.
Seeing what's on the hot list, who's on the cold list. Hot and cold list are very important to me. There's an area where you can sit and open packs with your friends, but
Mm,
it's like an intimate experience.
mm,
I've never been a fan of these just giant shops where
mhm,
it's, too much is too far wide apart. I like it when it's a little cozier, when,
mm.
when you feel like, and I like it when the card shop owner actually cares about you,
Yeah.
where you actually feel like that person isn't there to cheat you or rob you or take advantage of you, but actually loves the cards themselves. That's why every card shop I ever go to across the country, I always ask the card shop owner, what's your favorite card of all time? Because I
Mm.
try to jar them talking about why they got into the hobby to begin with, because a lot of them have forgotten and it's just a transactional thing.
That is such a great comment because that triggers in my memory about how one of the first videos I saw of you was this card owner, I forget which video and which store, but he was so standoffish in the beginning of the video, and you just melted him, and he became so like not emotional, but he was evoking emotion, and he was warming up to you, and it really was almost like a master class in how to lower someone's defenses and guard.
Yeah,
And I think you did marvelously in that, like, 90-second reel, right? Or whatever it was. And I was like, wow, I mean, great job by Brian by doing that. But also, like, it's that nostalgia, right? Like, you just tapped into something, into that person's mind, that just allowed them to open up.
yeah, that's so many times that people get in their jobs and they forget why they're there to begin with. They
Hmm.
forgot why they started something or why they were passionate to begin with, and then they lost the spark. So
Yeah.
I always like asking people, like, how did you feel when you opened that first pack? What was that? You know, tell me about a moment that were super excited when you met your favorite player and these kinds of things. And when people
Yeah.
start reaching into how they felt and they start, combining that with what they're now doing, you can
Hmm.
magic happens and people put down guards and start
Hmm.
remembering why they got into something to begin with. And so I've seen that happen a lot with local card shop owners.
Yeah, I mean, because some of these people, they look like the old guy from Up, and you're just like, I'm not saying like you're the little Boy Scout kid with the dog, but like there's something that you're doing to them. It's almost like a Jedi mind trick where I mean, you're not doing anything nefarious. I'm just saying more of like you really bring out the good in people, and I really
Thanks,
appreciate
man.
that. I think it's really
Thank you.
cool. I think it's like
And
it's like a superhero power or something like that. So, you kind of touched on this already, but I was going to ask you, what are some without I think it's easy for me to just say, "Oh, what's your favorite, which is your favorite hobby shop or which is your least favorite?" Like, I don't want to do that. What I would like to do, because you may not answer that because you don't want to put anyone on the spot. So my question to you would be something that you kind of already answered with, like, the intimacy of a small shop, but what are some of the best elements to you? What are the elements of the ideal or best local card shops you've been to? And then the follow up being, what are some of the elements of your least favorite shops that you've been to?
yeah, no, the favorites. I mean, just like like Honey Hole here in Escondido or Ross Card Shop. Like they're both two really great examples. And
Mm,
I would also say the Sports Room in Beaverton, Oregon.
mm-hmm,
Those kind of shops, it's personal. You're talking to the card shop owners. They're interested in what you're doing. They are helpful when they need to be. Sometimes they're just giving you information like, oh, I
mm,
don't know who I should be looking for in the new 2023 Bowman, and they start giving you ideas. I like that it's intimate, it's small. They have stuff. I like card shops that have junk wax as well as modern stuff. I don't
mm,
like walking into a card shop and it's only the most super modern. And I also don't like going into a card shop where clearly the worker there has no idea about anything to do with cards.
right.
I always think that's really weird. And yeah, I've been to a few card shops I can't stand. Like I always tell people, like I don't post everything that we film. Like people think, oh, I'm just enjoying every single card shop I go to. That's not true.
Mm,
There's like 5 card shops on my absolute do not go list.
mm,
One of these days I'll have to kind of reveal those. But
yeah.
The ones I don't like are the ones where you walk in and you feel like you're invading their special place somehow,
Hmm.
where they almost treat it like it's their own little special kind of club, and they're bugged that you're in their shop,
Yeah. Yeah.
and uh, where it's almost like their own personal addict or their it's kind of gross. Like some of the card shops just stink. They're bad. They're
Mm,
run by some guy that should have hung it up years ago that has
hmm.
no idea how disgusting their place is.
Yeah.
That I walked into a shop in Florida where I had to like walk out like 5 minutes later. It was so disgusting. Or a card shop I went to that was very close to LAX.
Okay.
Not very nice
Yep.
guys,
Okay.
just kind of rude. Like, what are you doing here? Kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's the worst. People who are like, "Are you going to buy something?" I've dealt with that in shows, in shops. I love, like, Instagram is my card family, and I love the content. Like, I try to stay positive, and I love other people's content. Of course, I love my own content. I don't know why I was trying to say that, but um, early on, and again, I'm someone wants to go to my very first post, they can see who it is. But I don't want to name them on the podcast. But I started Instagramming because I just had such a bad experience in a card shop where the owner it wasn't just haranguing me. Now I got really upset because this owner was kind of giving the business to my father-in-law, who I love. I'm not someone who is like, oh, my in-laws are terrible. Like, I love my in-laws, and my father-in-law is such a sweet person. And for the shop owner to try to pull one over him, I was just so livid. And it was one of those moments where I was like, hey, Pop, can you leave the store, because I'm gonna say something that I don't want. And I didn't like really do anything too mean, but I was just like, dude, I know what you're doing. Like, it was almost like I'm still so new into the hobby back then. This was like last year, before, like, again, my very, very new back into the hobby, re-entering the hobby after a very long hiatus. But even then I knew, wow, like, you don't treat people this way. And so
Yeah.
I gotta say, the when you feel like you're encroaching in someone's space, they're not inviting. When things smell, something that comes off the top of my mind is, they say that people who have cats, they do not know the smell of their own house. But if they go on vacation and come back after like a week or two, and they come back to their house, they go, oh my gosh, this is how my house smells like, because they get so
Yeah.
used to that smell, right?
Yeah, there's been some funky ones. Just right off the bat, man, I was just thinking about what you're saying about card shops that are great. There was a card shop back in New York. I went there about 14 years ago. It was called the Dugout, and it was in Brooklyn.
Okay.
And I mean, I don't know what ended up happening to them. I know they closed down, but I loved the experience of going to that shop. That was one of my all-time favorite moments. Is that I just come off the plane from England, where I was living at the time. And I went into Brooklyn. I had to do some kind of visa stuff. And I go to this card shop, and the guy that was running it was just so nice. As soon as I walked in, it felt like I was in an episode of The Sopranos or something. There were like these four dudes, older guys on stools. There was a couple kids in the shop, and they're like, hey, how you doing? All that kind of stuff. And we start opening packs, and we're trying to find some, like, I think it was like a Conseco out of a packs of 87 tops or something.
Okay.
And I ended up spending the next few hours, and they were so nice to me. And I had no money at the time. I barely had anything. I was broke beyond broke. And I felt like I was part of the group. They were like knowledgeable about stuff that I didn't know about. They were educating me about these players that I thought were common cards, but they were really important to New Yorkers. And next thing you know, they're inviting me to go to some bar down the street to go like watch a Rangers game with them. And it was just this, like, all of a sudden, here I'm coming off the plane from England in New York City. I don't know anybody in New York. And all of a sudden, here I am hanging out with these guys in Brooklyn who are opening their hearts, and they're just so kind to me and educating me, because I was relatively new back into the hobby. And it really kicked off my kind of local card shop stuff, because I had such a great experience with those guys. So that it was very intimate. It was small. They had junk wax. They had modern stuff. They had a totally open, very, very kind. I'd say a big part of the whole thing is just kindness. They even, like, oh, here's a few extra packs, right? That they gave me for free. They gave me some, plastics. I had gotten my Conseco card, and they gave me like a top loader to put it in. I think it's just those small little things that can make a difference between having a mediocre experience to not really wanting to go back to some of these sterile new ones where there's just no heart in them. They just don't. There's no soul. They're just there to make as much margin on the new product as they can, and they don't care about educating. And so I think there's I could talk about local card shops for hours and hours.
Yeah, I would love it. But yes, I have to try to be mindful of the listeners and your time as well, and my hunger levels. But well, I'm glad. When I think of plastic and Sopranos, there's usually not a good ending to that. But we need to preserve you. You are like a hobby legend, or like we need to preserve you and make sure that you are not going into any Sopranos type of establishments with plastic at the end. What was that movie? It was like with Mark Wahlberg and anyway. Yeah, I was like, he's like in a room with plastic. I'm like, okay, well, that's not good. But no, Sopranos. I gotta write in my notes here. Insert Sopranos clip here, or like Cheers or something like that. But let me just ask you, when it comes to that term you've used, and I have definitely wanted to talk to you about junk wax, because it does have like a negative connotation, but it's the era that you and I both grew up in and first started collecting as kids.
Yeah.
And people are worried about this junk wax era 2.0 that we're in potentially or are already in. And so, do you like when you hear that term junk wax? Like, what comes to your mind?
I think childhood in the 80s. It's overproduced cards. It's cards that, are always stacks of them at local card shops that no one ever buys.
Hmm.
And I think of them as a treasure trove. They are,
Hmm.
when I got back into this hobby 14 years ago, when I started opening packs, I had no cash. And so the idea that I could open a box of like 1989 Don Russ for like,
Hmm.
30, $40, it was like
Hmm.
junk wax for me was my gateway drug back in
Hmm.
because it was stuff that I could afford. I could sit in my hotel room and open a box of 89 or 88 or 87. So I everyone's like, oh, junk wax era 2.0. That's not a bad thing. That's not a
Hmm.
bad thing because it's that cheap stuff, the overproduced stuff that
Hmm.
allows people without any cash, minimal, all the people that are angry about junk wax eras, it's
Yeah.
always people that have a bunch of money and they're worried about their investments and they're worried
Mm.
about, shoring up the value of their collections. But you know what
Hmm.
it is? It allows people that don't have money to get into the hobby. It allows kids to be able to participate. Everyone's always like, oh, boxes are too expensive. Well, junk wax era 2.0 is a good thing because
Mm.
now kids that are able to participate and get packs for pennies on the dollar or star cards for pennies on the dollar or base cards, it allows them to enter the space at a cheap cost.
Wow, I did not expect you to say that. Again, we didn't prep a lot beforehand. That's very interesting that you say that. I'm gonna have to think about that some more, but I actually really appreciate that you said that because I do think that when it comes to the Instagram feeds, that we have, just cards in general, it's everything's so glamorized. Everything is like you've mentioned this in other podcasts or interviews where, we're always talking about the hits or showing the hits, and there is almost like a feeling that especially the younger kids, the teenagers have, where they reach out to you saying my collection feels inadequate, almost like someone who's watching a model on Instagram being like, my looks are inadequate. And it's like, no, you're beautiful. Your collection is beautiful. And yet you're told by society or your social media feed and the algorithm that you are not beautiful. And that really, breaks my heart because we need more people to feel adequate and not inadequate. And so go ahead.
Yeah, I have some very expensive cards in my collection, and yet my favorite card is my 1990 Leaf Frank Thomas that's off center. It's
Mm,
probably worth $10, and
mm,
it is my all-time favorite card. I love that card, and it's because of all these various reasons that I've kind of touched on already. But I think there's nothing I hate more in the hobby than like particularly kids feeling bad like they have to make some sort of an excuse as to why they don't have some sort of auto refractor rookie, special
yeah,
patch, relic.
right,
And
right.
I don't like that. I've had kids that say, "Hey, can you help me out? Can you give me some cards? I feel bad. I don't have any special cards." And I'm like, "Dude, that's not what this. No, it's okay, man. I didn't get my first nice card until I was in my 30s. It's
Yeah,
okay."
right. Um, that's fascinating, and I gotta say, I for those folks who are only listening to the audio, I took my head off. I feel like we're doing real talk, and I was getting a little bit hot too. But so no, this is fantastic. Going back to the 1990 Lee Frank Thomas, and you mentioned the 89 Don Russ that I wrote down here, and I definitely have to when I clip this, I want to like put a picture of the 1990 Lee Frank Thomas in the video so people can see it.
Right?
But I remember, because I wrote it down in Jeremy Lee's podcast in minute 68. You mentioned how your mom bought you a box of 1991 Don Russ, and how she didn't just give that whole
Yeah.
box to you at one time. She actually metered
I,
it out. You
yeah.
had to earn it, right? And these days it's like a box is ripped open like a savage in like 5 minutes, and like here you are having to earn your junk wax cards. And I wrote down here that you mentioned David Justice and how it was a terrible set, like from a monetary standpoint, but the memory you still have of that particular year and set, uh, because your mom was like just metering it out so that you can earn it. Like,
Yeah.
isn't life so much better when you can just earn things and they're not just given to you, right? I mean,
Yeah. I had to mow a lot of old ladies' lawns, man, that year. I was like on call for the neighborhood on weed whacking and mowing and raking leaves before I finally got that Dave Justice rookie out of that or
so
that.
wait, I gotta ask, how does that work? You're doing yard work for other people, and then are these other people giving money to your mom to pay
No,
for
it
that
was,
box, or
it
like,
was more like, I was doing good turns, man. It was like Boy Scout stuff. It was like
mm,
doing something nice for the community or doing chores
yeah,
around the house. But it was like kind of anything that was like, doing something for someone else.
and then your mom, and they would tell your mom, or you would tell your mom, and then
No,
she
no,
would,
I would usually tell her, I'm like, yeah, I just mowed Betty's lawn
yeah,
and let's go get you a pack. But that wasn't the real reason. It was just,
mm,
it was, we were broke. My dad was in school for 9 years of my childhood. And so we didn't have any cash. So if I had any cards, it was like, me having to find some, odd jobs like, lemonade stands or mowing lawns or whatever. But I liked the cards on the 91 Donruss handed out for various, doing good for other people kind of things. And I think that instilled some values there.
wow. So it's not an audio issue. It's me really feeling that because you and I don't know each other's stories. My listenership doesn't know this. So yeah, when I said my dad went to school in OSU to start, he went for his master's in OSU, he got it, and then he went for his PhD in York. And he was a student. He was a struggling grad student going for his thesis. We're talking 10 years of trying to make it as an Korean American. Well, I guess he wasn't American, like I'm a Korean. I am a dreamer, I guess you can say, but I'm a naturalized citizen now. My mom also got her citizenship, but here is a graduate student, Korean immigrant, trying to make it in America in New York City without a lot of money, and trying to finish his thesis, finish his doctorate, while raising me, and living in a foreign country. And money was really hard to come by. So when I think about those cards that I purchased as a kid, it's like probably shouldn't have, or like, it was. I mentioned this in my earlier episodes, but cards were the cheap way to enjoy sports as a kid.
Yeah.
When you and I were growing up, cards were so cheap, and yet going to a game, yes, now it's more expensive, and maybe back then it was not as expensive, but my parents weren't taking me to sporting events. They weren't buying me the best jerseys or the sneakers. Like, I'm the kid who wore the t-shirt jersey, right? The one
Yeah.
with the name and the number, but it's not a jersey. Or, I forget what type of sneakers, but I mean, so what you just said, I didn't even mean to talk about this, but it's real.
Yeah. And that's why when I smell a pack of cards from back in the day from the junk wax era, it teleports me to simple, easy times and pretty happy memories of riding my bike, like painting someone's house number on their curb, taking the $5 from that, riding my bike to the local card shop, buying a couple packs of 90 Upper Deck, pulling a Kevin Ma's rookie card, and those are special memories that I get to hold on to forever.
Isn't it so wild though about nostalgia that we tend to remember the good parts, and the bad parts we remember, but it's almost like it has to be pulled out, or like in a discussion like this, you open the door talking about your dad and his studies and not having a lot of money. I remember, yeah, I wrote down here that in one of the earlier podcasts you mentioned that you grew up on the poor side of town, and that you were completely broke in your 30s. And I think maybe that's how I want to transition into, like, how you in a way became Phil Knight's right hand man. But it's like
Mhm.
the triumphs are only as sweet because the struggles were so
Yeah,
deep. Oh my
yeah.
gosh, I didn't even mean to rhyme that. That was awesome. Whoa.
I'm gonna write that one down.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, clip that.
I think victory is sweetest after the trials, the tribulations, the
Hmm.
challenges, the hardships,
Hmm.
and I think uh, I think that's a big part of life. I think people I know that have enjoyed, it's if you're given everything from day one, it's really hard to kind of appreciate the things you couldn't have. And so, like,
Mhm.
one of the reasons I get a huge high from being able to now, at this point in my life, buy Mickey Mantles and Hank Aaron's and those kinds of cards is that it was unthinkable to own those things back in the day. It
Yeah.
was just unthinkable that I would ever own a Mickey Mantle card. Holy crap.
Right. Right.
And now I've got pretty much all the Mickey Mantles.
Mm.
you know, and so it's
Small humble brag, but yes, continue.
well, yeah, it's well, that's the thing, is that it's possible now, and that's
Yeah.
one of the joys of this hobby, is that it's a very different experience doing it as a kid to doing
Yeah.
it as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, when you're a kid, it's unthinkable. And
Yeah.
even, I bought my first Mickey Mantle card. It was kind of half ripped when I was about 33.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to, set some cash aside. And as different things happen in my life or successes, I would try to acquire another one and try to fill the gaps in my collection. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's why it's a lifelong process.
Yeah.
That's why one of the reasons I love this hobby is that it is a lifelong quest to find and piece together the collection that you want.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So all you kids out there doing trade up challenges with your Zion cases with $1,000 slabs. No, I'm just kidding. I just love that. Whoever, if you want to collect, there's multiple different entry points, and so
endless different entry points and endless different ways.
Yeah,
and that's what makes this such a multifaceted, interesting,
right.
No right way, no wrong way kind of hobby, which I think is fantastic.
It is. So I want to set up the following question, or I want to set up the question after getting your just story about, again, I've teased it too many times for us to dance around it enough. So smash cut, hard tangent, let's go. Your time in Nike and being Phil Knight's right hand man, because I have not read this in any article or heard it in any of the podcasts. I would love to learn more about this.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I was his right hand man. What I had my experience with him. What it was is that I'd grown up around Nike. I grew up maybe a mile away from Nike headquarters, and so I always had a had a real love for Nike. Moved there at the same year that Nike headquarters built in 1987, and I became I was as much into Nike shoes as I was into cards at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I bought my first pair of Air Maxes in 1990, and from babysitting, and then about when I was, I think, 35 or so, I had an opportunity where I got a job at Nike World Headquarters in their philanthropic group. So I got hired into the what was called kind of a mix of Nike Foundation, Global Community Impact, and the Girl Effect. It was kind of the three different parts of Nike's philanthropic groups. And so I was there for a couple of years, and it was a very pivotal time in my life. A lot of changes, switching one career to another career, a lot of life things with relationships and family. So it was a very important time in my life, and I got hired in, and I just fell in love with the whole experience. Like, I was, around shoes, and I was collecting cards while I was there. I was going to my local card shop I'd gone to as a kid. So it was a very special time. And no, my moment with Phil Knight was, is that I stayed out late one day. I was waiting for my girlfriend at the time to pick me up, and she showed up quite late. And so I was hanging out at there's this museum on campus, and I was hanging out afterwards, after hours, and I was the only person in the Nike museum. And I loved going there after hours. It's kind of this really special spot with all these original shoes from back in the day. And I'm standing there, and I was watching this television screen that was showing clips of Steve Prefontaine, who I'm a big fan of, and a bunch of his races. And this guy comes up behind me and he goes, "Oh, that was a really cool race." And I was like, "Yeah, that was fantastic." I turn around, I see that it's Phil Knight standing beside me. And I said, "Well, what do you think about this guy on the wall over here?" It was all these pictures of Phil Knight. And he's like, "Oh, that guy's a clown." And I was like, all the locals in Beaverton always called him Uncle Phil. So I was like, "Uncle Phil, how often do you come into your own museum?" And he's like, "Oh, you're a local kid, And he goes, I usually come in here about once every 6 months to remind myself how this all came to be. and to never lose touch of the foundings of Nike and how lucky we were. Bill Bowerman, Phil Knight, and Steve Prefontaine all kind of at the same place, same time, just really nice happenstance. And so we talked for probably about 5 or 10 minutes and had this just really nice rapport. Love the guy. And he's one of the few people in business I truly respect. And his book Shoe Dog is my favorite book of the last 10 years. And yeah, if I'm going to plug one thing, I would read Phil Knight's Shoe Dog. Fantastic story, and there's actually some parallels to my own life in there. And so that was it. I left floating, and nobody at work the next day believed that I had this real special encounter with Phil, because at this point he wasn't really coming to headquarters very often. He wasn't CEO anymore. And so now with him picking up the Blazers, this is the greatest thing that could happen for a guy like me.
So that's what he wants to do, and so that's what I want to talk about. Before saying that, two things I wanted to tag here for myself: minute 38 or 39, Uncle Phil. So I'm gonna put in here a smash cut of Uncle Phil from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I'm gonna put that. And it seems like you had like an awesome night at the museum type of moment with with Phil. That's so awesome. But so. We are recording this. I'll just say it, June 5th. I am trying to do evergreen content, but we live in times when maybe the fireside chats aren't going to be so evergreen, and that's totally okay. But the news broke or came out kind of like non-news news, but what did my notes say? Basically, I think her name is Jody Allen. So she's not the wife, but she's the sister of Paul Allen, who was the co-founder of Microsoft. So when Paul Allen passed and Jody Allen became the heir to the Blazers empire or regime, she was like, "This, I'll never sell. I'll never sell the Blazers." And Phil Knight, I guess it's been his lifelong obsession or desire to buy the Blazers. And so my question to you is, as someone who adores and respects Phil Knight, Uncle Phil, and the Blazers being like your most favorite basketball team, what would it mean to you for that to potentially occur?
I've been waiting my whole life for that. Like, I wanted Phil Knight to buy the Blazers back in the late '80s. Like, this was inevitable. I always wanted this, and no, I'm pleased. Like, Paul Allen was nice and everything, but man, Phil Knight owning the Blazers, that's the most apropos thing that could possibly happen. I can't wait.
We'll see if it happens, because right now she won't take his calls, and I guess these billionaires, they still have like rotary phones and they're calling each other on bat phones, but I guess she can't answer a text from him or check her mentions.
If he doesn't end up buying the Blazers, I'm going to buy the Blazers.
So yes, there you go. So that's a great segue to what I want to talk to you about. So that was your time in Nike, and now, I did listen to these podcasts from last year, and I think it was you record with Jeremy in August, and you were saying how you wanted to make, within the hobby landscape, beautiful displays or ways to display your cards in a beautiful manner to elevate the collection, and that you said that you had a goal for Q1 of 2023. So we're like recording in June. Can you give us any update about what you do within the hobby landscape and how things are going?
Absolutely. First, I'll give you a little warning that I've got about 3% battery on my
computer, no!
So okay. I'm coming to a close pretty quickly.
I gotcha. Absolutely.
We actually finished everything. We completed everything. I've got some of the examples just sitting right in front of me right now, and I'm looking at. I'm telling you, these are game changers in the hobby. This is some game changer stuff that the few people that I've shown them to are madly in love with. I've reinvented the way to display and protect and preserve collectibles. And so we're all done. It's just that there were some others across the hobby, kind of some of the big fish, both in the sports world in general, sports stars, and in our hobby that became aware of what I was doing with my company, my team. And so we're kind of doing this in a much bigger way. We're doing a much bigger kind of release. Okay. And so I'll be sharing stuff, and probably in the next month, I'm going to start sharing some stuff. And I think we'll start actually putting this stuff in the market as far as where people can buy and own. I'm at lots of different price points probably as soon as August, I would say, is my guess.
Wow, August. Okay, that's in 2 months. And if someone's listening to this in 2024 and beyond, you will have already seen this. I'm
Yeah.
really excited. I will not pry. I will respect the confidentiality and the privacy of your release. So I do want to ask you after we are done recording, and maybe another time when your phone's charged up, to ask about those 5 places to avoid, because I don't want to go to those places
Oh,
or
yeah.
stumble
No,
upon them.
I
But I
have no
won't be.
problem sharing that. Yeah.
So I can't find my notes about my closing, but I with you being at 3% battery, and sometimes that three jumps to zero real quick. I did want to say thank you so much for your time here. I feel like, yes, we could talk forever. I would love to have you on in the future to talk about TikTok and about just content creating, because that's another hat that I like to wear. Right now, I'm not wearing a hat, but I would love to learn from you and have our listeners learn from you about how to like increase their social media presence. And so, any last words before I have a closing for you?
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks for having this chat. It like with talking to you today, it didn't feel like it was any kind of podcast. I just feel like I'm talking to my buddy right now, right?
Yeah.
So thank you so much for being just easy and chill to talk to, and
Mm,
for bringing that positive vibe into the hobby. I'm really excited about what the next 10 years is going to be. And I think it's going to be guys like you and some others I've met that are going to kind of lead this charge and making it a safe, positive, happy, fun, interesting place. So to anyone listening, thanks for listening today. It was a lot of fun, and hope to meet all of you at different card shops all around the country or different sporting events. I'm going to be doing tons more traveling over the next couple of years, and I hope to meet all of you guys.
yes, I love that. Thank you so much for being such a good positive force in the hobby as well. We just have to leave this place in a better place for our kid, for like the future generation of collectors. And I gotta say, for your influence and reach that you have, you really are just a positive force that can't be stopped. So I'm along there for the ride. I'm a fan of yours. And I just can't wait to see what there's in store for you, and the content that you're going to provide, and that secret project that's coming out soon. I will be one of the first buyers of that. So thank you so much, Brian Pirrip. You have been a fantastic interview, just like I knew you would be. So hope you have charge your phone, get it out of the heat. But I can't wait to meet you in person as well soon. And thank you for everything that you do.
Matter of time, brother. Thank you so much. Take care. All the best.
Thank you.